Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Jerry Brownlee.
Mr. Speaker, I think there has been an attempt over the last number of hours in the House to sort of rewrite history in a way that conveniences the arguments being put forward by opponents to this bill. Firstly, let me say the Honourable Trevor Mallard said this has been a sorry saga, and I agree with him, it has been. There was a suggestion throughout the contributions offered from the other side of the House that somehow New Zealand was put in a difficult position and was required to capitulate to some foreign national corporation. Mr. Speaker, we should be very, very clear, that if it had not been for the actions of the Australian Media Entertainment Arts Alliance and their director, Mr. Simon Whip, we would not be in this position right now. And it's been the absolute blinkers on members from the other side of the House, preventing them from seeing that point, that has been a little bit disappointing in this argument. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the history, sir, there's no doubt that there were some financial concerns about the future of the movie. Everyone knows that. Those have been sorted. There were some concerns about the effect of Bryson versus 3'6", but there had been a history over a period of years, 3 years in fact, 4 years, where it was felt that we were getting to a slightly more settled position. Indeed, Warner's came down here and made a movie called Yogi Bear, about $160 million worth, earlier this year, and there was no issue at that point. Where things tipped over seriously here is when the Australian Union decided to issue, through the International Federation of Actors, a ban on anyone signing a contract for The Hobbit unless that contract was negotiated by the Australian Media Entertainment Arts Alliance. That's the problem. And at that point, everybody who was likely to have a stake financially in the picture said to themselves, well, what does this mean for the next 4 years as we go ahead producing these pictures? And it was pretty clear that there was an unsettled industrial road ahead. Unsettled industrial road ahead. And while people might say there was no need for this because there was a meeting in Auckland which I convened, where the screen producers gave their position, where the Media Entertainment Alliance of Australia gave their position, and Actors Equity sort of watched on, sad and forlorn, not knowing what's going on, and Helen Kelly from the CTU played a very constructive role. There was a possibility that the Pink Book conditions, which are the conditions that form the basis for contracts in New Zealand and have done for some year, could be updated with negotiation. It is wrong for anyone to say that it was settled at that point. Quite wrong. Because repeatedly, Simon Whip went into the media and said, all we want is a collective contract with the producers of The Hobbit. And that, sir, was the problem. Exactly the problem. Under our commerce law, it is not possible for people who want to engage others in a production as contractors to negotiate collective arrangements for those contracts. That's anti-competitive. And sure, there is a piece of legal advice that floated around and was provided at huge expense, I'm sure, to the New Zealand Actors Equity, but there was equally a piece from New Zealand Crown Law that made it abundantly clear that that was the situation. Our question was, do we believe Crown Law or do we believe the Queen Street lawyers who have produced an opinion for the man who writes the cheques, Mr. Simon Whip? In the end, it was clear to us that this was a problem. How big a problem had to be sorted out at some point. We met with Warner Brothers, as everyone knows, and it was pretty clear, their nervousness, I should say, was very clear to us around this particular issue. It was then an interesting exercise to find out what was on the table for them from other jurisdictions. and to come to the realisation that, yes, relocation was a serious prospect. All this talk that we've got from people on the other side of the House that they were never going to go, they'd never walk away, all the rest of it, no one is going to commit 600 to 700 million New Zealand dollars into an investment based on securing people to offer their talents to that endeavour, uncertain that those talents would be there at the end as they were at the start, particularly with film, where even one person going off the reservation can cause such huge cost and devastation to the production. So once that was understood, it was incumbent, I think, in the short time space we had for us to come up with a solution, and that's what the government has done. There is nothing in this bill which takes away from the rights of those who participate in the production of those movies. Nothing at all. All it does is codify the arrangements under which their engagement is contracted. And that is perfectly reasonable. Perfectly reasonable. I believe it will work. I think it will work. I'm quite confident it will work, because what it will mean is that if someone decides partway through that they are not a contractor and they go off to the court and say, actually, I'm an employee, that the courts will not have jurisdiction to determine in that matter, because it's stated as a piece of law through the New Zealand Parliament. Mr. Speaker, the other suggestion that people who work in the back office or anything else are going to be caught up in this, I think also steps too far. There is, of course, in any of these circumstances, the worst possible light always going to be placed on these things. In the end, we have in New Zealand a $2.8 billion screen production industry. And that was at risk. If the Hobbits had exited here, or the production had exited here, so much of the expertise that is domiciled in New Zealand would have had to move with it. And how we would have ever got that back is beyond me. Mr. Speaker, I am in no doubt, having been close to this for a long time, that had it not been for the influence of the Australian Union over the hapless people who call themselves New Zealand Actors Equity, we would have been in severe trouble. I'll go further and say, had it been the CTU, and this is a big statement from me, and Helen Kelly involved right from the start, and not being put in a position of having to defend an Australian who frankly has got very little going for him at all, then I think the situation may have been different. But we weren't. The gun was put to Warner Brothers' head. The dreadful attacks on Sir Peter Jackson and Lady Fran, completely unacceptable. New Zealand is a country that should value that talent. We do value that talent, and I know that the Labour Party deep down do support that these pictures are made here. I accept that completely. But, Mr. Speaker, there could be no uncertainty for those who are making such a big investment. And we need to understand that that investment, while it can be quantified as around 600-700 million, in fact is far, far bigger, because others will come here as a result of certainty, and there is already evidence of that. Mr. Speaker, this is a good move by the Parliament of New Zealand to support the income-earning opportunities of our most talented New Zealanders.
I call Carol Beaumont.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.